What if you could print dye discharge prints in your shop without adding a whole nother line of ink and pigments? Well, with Ryonet's new RyoCharge additive, you can. RyoCharge is an additive that you can mix 50-50 with any Plastisol ink to create a discharge style of ink. So basically, you can take any colored ink, like let's say Ryopaque Scarlet Red right here, mix it 50-50 with RyoCharge, and it turns Ryopaque Red into a discharge red. It's awesome because no longer does that Plastisol have that thick hand or feel. It feels nice and soft once it's washed with discharge. Plus, turns the ink into a much thinner ink, so it transfers into the shirt better, holds good detail, and allows you to print discharge style of shirts without adding a whole nother line of ink. So let's show you how to use Ryonet's new RyoCharge additive so you can turn Plastisol into discharge. First, let's show you how to make the screen. You can actually use a standard Plastisol emulsion. Here we are exposing the emulsion and rinsing it out. Next, if we're using a standard Plastisol emulsion, we can simply take an emulsion hardener and harden the screen after it's been exposed. What the hardener does is it hardens the screen and resists it to water-based or discharge style of ink. You can also use a water-resistant emulsion as well. Now we have the screen up here, it's been exposed, it's been hardened and dried, and we have it taped. So let's go to mixing ink. So what we do is a 50-50 mix here. It's very simple. You can either do it by weight or even by measurement. 50-50 is the key, and then we're going to mix in the discharge agent to that. So once this is in the container, it's completely stable. Once it's mixed with ink, it's completely stable. It does not turn into a discharge ink, which has a shelf life of about 8 hours once it's mixed until you mix the agent in. So you can take a standard Plastisol ink. Here we have our Ryopaque Scarlet Red, and we're going to actually do this on the scale. So let's turn on our gram scale and grab an empty quart container here. So now let's take our Ryopaque Scarlet Red. Now the opaque colors work awesome for this because they have more pigment in them. A standard Plastisol works okay too, but it doesn't have as much pigment as, let's say, the Ryopaque colors. So if you want to add the RyoCharge into an ink line, specific ink line, we definitely recommend the Ryopaques. They work awesome because of the high opacity and the high amount of pigment in them. So we have 77 grams here. And we're going to add another 77 grams, so 50-50 mix of the RyoCharge. Now the RyoCharge is much thinner, so it's going to really thin down your ink. You can see how thick that Plastisol was. So let's go up to 154 here. Now we have a 50-50 mix, and we're going to go ahead and mix this up. So as we mix this up, it really thins down that Plastisol. You really want to mix it aggressively so that the Plastisol and the RyoCharge are completely mixed together. Okay, you can see now the ink's a little bit more runny. So now we're going to activate the ink. We don't want to activate all the ink until we're ready to print. The ink stays activated for about 8 hours. If you actually have like a shop fridge, it might stay for a little bit longer than that. For ink activation, we're going to use Ryonet's standard discharge agent. Now this is formaldehyde base. A little bit of formaldehyde in it. So what you do want to use this in is in a ventilated area. Also, with your shirts after they're printed, you might want to send pre-wash instructions or pre-launder the shirts. The discharge will feel so much better once the shirt's washed and it won't stink whatsoever. We're taking 4% of our total weight and mixing in 4% agent. So with 155 grams of ink, we're going to mix in about 6.5 grams of discharge agent. We zeroed out the scale and we'll put the agent in. Once our 6.5 grams are mixed in, we'll finish mixing the ink. Now once that agent's mixed into the RyoCharge Plastisol hybrid, we're going to let that sit for a couple minutes and allow that agent to really start to activate the ink. This is where the ink's activated. Now once again, once this is mixed, it has about an 8-hour shelf life. You can see when the discharge is activated, the ink thins down a little bit more, becomes a little bit more consistent, and it starts to bubble up a little bit, and that's when you know when you're ready to print. Now we're ready to print. RyoCharge is great for dark garments. So you take those nice colorful Plastisol inks, mix it up 50-50, and now we're going directly on a black shirt. But the cool thing is we're going through a 230 mesh screen, and we're going with some high detail halftones as well. So you can see how it can expose a spot color image and how to do a halftone image. Let's put a little bit in the screen. Now let's print. First we flood. And by the way, when you're printing with this, you always want to make sure the ink stays flooded over the screen like that. That way the screen's not drying out. This will dry out your screen, so you do not want to leave it in the screen for too long. Then we're going to do one print and see what we get. There's the first print of the discharge. So now, with this print, we're going to do 2 solid passes because it's a little bit higher mesh screen. Remember to always black flood your screen so you don't leave your image open and drying. Here we have a print, 2 passes with the RyoCharge printed through a 230 mesh screen, mixed 50-50 with Ryopaque Scarlet Red. We see we have some nice block color and some halftones there as well. It looks like we have a nice penetration. Now it's not bright whatsoever. The important part here is that the garment is penetrated. If the ink just stays on top of the fibers, it has to sit down into the fibers, because if it just stays on top of the fibers, what will happen is not in the entire shirt will discharge out. Let's go ahead and throw it through the dryer and see what kind of results we get. Before, when curing RyoCharge mixed with the Plastisol ink, it's important that it reaches 320 degrees for about 30 seconds. Now, it is a wetter ink, so that does take a little bit of air movement optimally. However, if you don't have an airflow dryer, you can slow down your belt, maybe lower your gates a little bit, run your belt a little slower, or maybe even run it through twice. Woohoo! Here it comes. So that is the RyoCharge mixed 50-50 with Ryopaque Scarlet Red Plastisol. Nice, bright. Man, we even retain the halftone detail here. Let's get a little closer shot of that. You can see that. Now, it does have a little hand and feel right now, but once it's washed, it'll retain the brightness, but feel freaking really nice and soft, just like the cotton of the shirt. Here are some tips and tricks when printing RyoCharge. Make sure that you have a lot of ink loaded in the screen. If you don't have a lot of ink loaded in the screen, it starts to dry out. As you can see right over here, it's already started to dry. So especially if it's hot conditions in your shop, keep the screen flowing with ink. Second, if you're printing, it's very important that the ink penetrates through the garment. Right here, with just one pass through this 230 mesh screen, the ink didn't do that. So we're going to load the screen up again, and we'll show you what it looks like when it's penetrated through. So as you can see right there, it's penetrated through the fabric. Very important. Typically, if you're printing this through like 156 mesh, you won't have to hit it as many times. With a 230 mesh screen, properly mixed inks, we're hitting it twice. 110, 156, you can probably get away with hitting it once. It's Stripes Day here at Ryonet, so Luke Riker printed up a cool RyoCharge 50-50 Ryopaque green shirt, using the Stripes movie poster. Pretty awesome though. Great detail, nice soft hand and feel. It will even feel nice and softer. Once again, we're demonstrating it can go through higher mesh than standard Plastisol ink and maintain a nice bright image without the hand and feel on a dark garment. Okay, once you're done printing, do your final print and clear the screen all the way out. So we're gathering all the ink from the bottom of the screen, and we're doing one more final pull on this shirt. Now let's pick up as much ink possible on the squeegee and scoop it back into the container. You only want to mix up as much ink as you're going to need for the job. This ink only lasts about 8 hours, so if you mix up too much, you're going to be wasting some ink. So we want to scrape as much ink out of the screen as possible. For cleanup, we can use a standard screen wash, and that cleans up the screen nicely. Make sure to get as much ink out as possible prior to that. You can also use an ink degradant in the washout sink if you're going to be cleaning and then reclaiming. With your ink knife and squeegee, be sure to wipe that off well, because it will corrode it. And once all the ink is in the container, just throw your rags away, cap it, and dispose of it in the garbage. RyoCharge is a great additive to normal Plastisol ink if you're looking to give your customers something different. Perfect for dark garments, giving them a nice soft hand and feel without having to add a completely different line of ink to your shop. So whether you're a Discharge user or Plastisol user, look for the ease of RyoCharge on our website, silkscreening supplies.com.